Alright everybody, welcome back to another video, and in this one we're going to be building out our invitation system so we can actually invite other users onto the site. However, before we get to that, I want to point out some updates from the last video to this one, and that is our shop feature is now live on the newboston.com. However, whenever I was releasing this, I ran into some migration issues, so I did have to pretty much reset all data. And we only had 3 users on the site, so it wasn't a big deal. But for those 2 other users, in addition to me, if you notice that you can't log in anymore, then just go ahead and ask me for another invite code, and I'll send you one. And I guess, yeah, that's kind of a good segue into what we're doing now. So previously, whenever anyone else wanted to sign on to the site, for example, they log out, they go to create an account, they needed an invitation code. And what I had to do is pretty much go in Django admin, add a new one, and then like copy and paste it, send it over to them. It was kind of cumbersome, and only I could invite people. So now what we're going to do is we're going to have an invitation section where you can create new invitations. For example, anyone can create these invitations and like send them to their friends or family or whoever they want on the site. And I also have it where, kind of to prevent people from just creating new accounts, getting new invitations codes, creating new accounts, getting new invitation code, and just like spamming with a bunch of fake accounts. So how this works is that right now, whenever I send out invitations, I'm going to have a limit of 10 invitations I can create. Now, whoever accepts that invitation, when they come in here and they send out invitations, they're going to have a limit of 9 invitations that they can create. And then whoever they invite is going to have 8, so on and so forth. So that is a way where even if someone like wanted to spam with a bunch of fake accounts, they can only create a limited amount. So I figure that's good enough for now for our, I don't know, kind of to solve this issue of a bunch of fake accounts. But yeah, okay. So on the back end, I already created this invitation limit model, and this is pretty much saying what user is it and how many invitations can they send out. And you can see I was just playing around with some things right here. And then these invitation objects, of course, are going to consist of an owner, pretty much the creator, the recipient, and then this is going to be null by default. And then once a user signs up for the site and accepts that, then this is going to be equal to that user. And it's pretty much a way to tell if the invitation has been, accepted or not, used or not. This is just the invitation code that they're going to need to paste in the form. And then I also added a note because, for example, let's say that you create 5 different invitations, and they're just like, the invitation codes are just random letters right here. And then you send 5 to your, 5 of your friends. I figured in the UI it's going to be a little bit tricky to see who you sent each one to. And for that reason, we're going to allow them to type in an optional note. And this is going to say something like sent to Betty or something. So that's going to be a more realistic note. But that's basically what I have built on the back end. And now in this video, we're going to be building out the front end. So with that said, I already got my branches checked out. The back end should be good to go unless we run into any problems. But the front end, I didn't do anything to it yet, except kind of build out the profile page, which is unrelated to what we're trying to accomplish here today, but I mention it because the invite section is going to go on the right. Now, eventually, my plan for this is to kind of of course, have more features on the site rather than just being able to sign in and invite more people, and that's it. You can't even do anything, just invite people. But I eventually will probably have these subsections under tabs like my posts, my friends, my photos, my invite section, so on and so forth. But for right now, invite is the only feature we got. So I'm pretty much going to plop it right here on the right. And then later on, we can, have it under its own tab or subpage or whatever we decide to do. But for right now, we're just going to get down and dirty and build it right like that. All right. So for render right, so the structure, kind of give you guys what I'm going for, is probably going to be similar to this, where I'm going to have a section like this that's going to say invitations. And then I'll have it either say add or create. And then once we do, then we'll pretty much have something that looks like pretty similar to this actually, where actually let's just start with that heading and take it nice and slow. Let's take it nice and slow. Okay, so what we can do is actually steal it from pages, sell products, and we'll see what's going on with you. So just like products, I want a grid, and then with columns in it, and padding top and bottom should be good. Okay, now we can even get this section heading before that. So yeah, let's go ahead and just jump in and get our feet dirty. Okay, so on the right hand side, what I'll do is I'll create a section heading. And what props do you take? Okay, so you need a heading, and we'll just say invitations, and then for the right content, it's going to be button. So let me just steal these two. And yeah, clean up my imports. Just getting kind of the structure of things right now. So we're going to need a button that you click, and it's eventually going to open a modal, maybe? Hold on, let me think through this in a second. But for now, we'll just say whenever you click it, it logs out click, and render button. Add a new invitation. I'm thinking create sounds a little bit more intuitive. I want to create a new invitation. Now this button is going to be the right content for this section heading. All right, review, then let's see what we got going on so far. Okay, invitations, create, and then you create one. And then, yeah, do we even need a modal? Or maybe we can just, let's see on the back end, whenever we create one. So post, invitations, what was I passing in? Well, first, whenever we just create an invitation, okay. So whenever we create an invitation, we don't need to pass up any data, because on the back end it generates the unique code, of course the ID. By default the note is just blank. The owner is you, and the recipient, no one accepted it yet because you know, it's just default. So in that case, I'm thinking that maybe we don't even need modal here, because one option that we have is whenever we create an invitation, then we can probably send up a default note. Yeah. Wait, is that the same ID? Okay. So what we could do is we can say, whenever I create this, pop up in a modal, and it just has a note field, and then you have the option of filling that out or leaving it blank, and then hitting submit, and then we can just use that whenever you're editing the invitation, because whenever you edit it, you're going to be able to edit this note as well. So maybe we will go with that logic. For now, what we can do is actually just display the empty state. So on my, similar to sell products, yeah, what we can do is this. We can say render content, and if there are no invitation length, then just return that empty state. So render content, we'll just put an empty list here, and then we'll just say return null as well. All right, so this is going to be if you have invitations, basically if invitations list has a length, then go ahead and render them out. Otherwise, so we'll say no invitations to display as an empty text component. And then that render content is going to go right under this section heading. no invitations to display. Perfect. So now let's go ahead and let's go with the modal method. And then we'll get some invitations. Okay. Yeah, this will allow us to connect with our backend pretty quickly too. How do I want to do this? Okay. Let's get this modal going, and we'll say it's not create, it's not edit. We will just say invitation modal. Yeah. Invitation modal. Okay, so you got styles, and then you have a main component file which is named index, and then rename this to invitation modal. Okay, actually let me pause the video. I gotta go blow my nose. It's running for some reason. Alright, and we are back. Nose blown. That is the nose update. And let's see what else. Okay, so first thing I could probably do is just create a simple modal from this. Where can I steal? Address, select modal, trade. Create, edit. Yeah, I really just want a simple form in here, but okay. So first, probably just need to style this modal. Okay. So let me get a styled modal, and it will be fluctuation column with 360. We'll see how that looks. May need to tweak it a little bit later on. But now I really just want to get something there. So this will be a modal, and it will say it'll either say create or edit invitation. This will be determined by what we're actually doing to this invitation, if we're creating one or editing one. But for right now, we can just hard code this in. And now I just want to make sure that it's appearing on the screen. So yeah, it's going to be the same pattern as this. Invitation modal, invitation modal. Alright, so we can say invitation modal is open, and toggle invitation modal for state variables. And now here, did I import my modal? Yep. Okay. So if the invitation modal is open, then what we want to do is we want to render the invitation modal with the close of toggle invitation modal. Otherwise, we are going to render a null. And then also, oh, we have two buttons on our profile now, don't we? Yeah, render button. Oh, I see. Okay. And this is a button too. So for render button, I'll say render create invitation button. Alright, so render create invitation button, and that way we can differentiate it from our button right here, which is our edit profile button. And then when you click this, instead of handle button click, what we want to do is we can just do toggle invitation modal. Get rid of this click handler, and that should give us our logic. So create invitation, there we go. Close, and apparently I'm oh wait a minute, passing in the wrong prop, or not accepting props at all. Okay, so here what I need to do is create an interface so it can accept that close prop. So in my invitation modal, I'm going to be passing in a close prop. So to accept them, this is what I do. And then pass that bad boy through. And then whenever you click the close button on the modal, it should get that close logic now. As long as I'm passing it through, yeah. So again, there we go. Open, close, open, close. Beautiful. Okay. So we got a modal, and so this is going to allow for us to either add invitations or edit them. Either way, the only thing that we are doing is working with the notes field. So let's go find a form, a very simple form that we can use. And where do we have a simple form? Maybe the withdraw form. Shop, add to cart, remove from cart. Yeah, maybe the withdraw form is easiest. All right, so let me just borrow some of this logic and let's see. So first, can close out a U, and we're going to be working in the invitations modal, so don't need any U, and this is the form that I want to steal. Okay. And you know what I'm thinking of is, even though it's a little bit more complicated of a form, it may be better. Maybe address details, because I'm thinking we get this logic where we pretty much have something and we can determine if we're editing it or updating it. Yeah. Actually, what I'm thinking I want to do even before creating this form is kind of set up my Redux store to where these invitations are going to be stored. And I say that because that is going to require me typing out my invitations, and then from those types I can make the API endpoints and the dispatcher functions, and then kind of work the opposite order. By the time I get to my form, I'm going to have all my pieces ready. Otherwise, we're just going to have to print out some data here and not do anything with it. So let me do that. So do I have any invitation logic at all in my store or in my types? I don't think so. Interesting. Okay, cool. So on that note, let's get our good buddy old ChatGPT out here, and we can start typing these out. So my two models I'm going to need are, of course, my invitation and then my invitation limit. So I will say, and I believe that we already have create and modified. Okay. So first of all, let's just type out our invitations. New TypeScript file, invitations. And yeah, where are we? Okay, so created and modified is going to come from here. And then this is going to be my same design pattern. Dicks come from generic. All right. So basically, I want to have an invitation. And then it has an ID. It has created and modified. And then we're going to be storing them keyed by ID. Okay. So now, ChatGPT, why don't you, and actually, how did these come back? So the owner which is the creator, and the recipient. Okay, this is interesting. This is interesting. So right now I have them coming back where everything is in ID, but I'm wondering if the recipient should be a user read serializer so we get their information. That way, on this page right here, where is it? On this profile page, when we see who accepted it, then yeah, it would make sense to actually see them. You don't need to serialize the owner because you're on their profile page. Okay, so let's do that. All right. So on my serializers, I only have this. Okay. All right, now I don't know if I'm gonna have to create a new serializer or what, but, and let me just make sure of one other thing, and that is this. So let me get my invitations, and in one of these, I just want to test around where, let's see. So let's say the IS1, what happens whenever you do have a recipient? We'll say it's Emma. So in that case, yeah, the recipient is just an user ID right now, but what we want to do is we want to use a user read serializer for that. Okay. So that would be user read serializer, read only equals true, and this is imported from the Boston users, and this is the recipient. Now, is this good enough? Okay, so now the recipient is being serialized, and now let me just make sure my creation logic still works. Create an invitation, hey now, and that is good. Okay, so it should be looking all right now. Yeah, recipient is either null or a user read serializer. Okay, and now let me just make, oops, just lint this. All right, looking good. Looking good. Okay, so now what was I gonna do? Have ChatGPT create me an interface for this. But I don't even think we need to. It's easier if we just do it ourselves. Okay, so the owner of these invitations is gonna be a number. And then, let's see, the recipient, actually let's do note first. So code and note are both going to be strings. And note is also a string. And then for the recipient, what we are going to do is use user read serializer. Let me just steal this. So actually it's going to be null. Okay, so recipient is nullable. So For recipient, we can say user serializer or null. Okay, this should be good. All right, so invitations they do have created modified, right? Ooh, this is interesting. Ooh, very interesting. I thought I added that. Oh, invitations have created modified, but they're just not. In our serializer. Read-only fields. Actually, let me do this. Just wanted to see my usage and some other parts. Read-only fields. Read-only field. Okay, so I pretty much just have to eat them. Did I say eat them? Add them to read-only fields. Yeah, because in fields, we don't want the user to pass these up. These are all on Mac, so file. Okay, so now let's test this again from the top. So in creating invitations, you could pass an optional note, send that, you get this back, which is interesting. And then when you get your invitations, wait a minute. Did I have to add that to the fields? In addition to the read-only fields? Where's that grade? Maybe so. That would be interesting. Okay. Code created modified. Alright, so server is updated. Now, let's see this logic. So I'm creating invitations, note yo, okay, create a date and modified date. I don't have to pass those in, and then whenever I get invitations, they also have a created and modified date. Beautiful. Alright, so one more time, hopefully, make lint. I thought I had the invitation model all ready to go, but apparently it was missing a few things. But that's all right. We chug along. All right. So backend, hopefully is good now. Although I have a feeling it's not going to be the last time I say that. Invitation. Okay. So from here, let's go ahead and pretty much just import into our main index file. Invitations came over generic. Alright, so from invitations, what new types do we got? We got the invitation type for a single invitation, then invitations, which is how it's going to be stored in Redux. And then they go right here. PQRST, okay, all good. And now, let me go ahead and create a little slice for them. So in the store, I'm going to create a new invitations file. However, before we do that, we need to actually use these from constants and HI. Okay. Invitations. Now, we can use it here, or wait a minute, here. The only question becomes, what do we need to be able to do to these? So we need to be able to create them, edit them, set a list at a time. For example, whenever we go to this page, we're going to be fetching all our invitations, and also delete them. And the logic I have on the back end for deleting is you are allowed to delete an invitation if it has not been accepted yet. Of course, once it's accepted, you can't really like delete it, or it's like gonna have to delete the user who accepted it as well, and that is just a bit messy. So on that note, what I'm thinking is pretty much where to steal this logic from, and I'm thinking products, because products you can create and edit, set multiple, and then delete them as well. So this is pretty much the exact same logic that we want. And in that case, steal. Okay. So let me replace this with invitations. So products constant is replaced with invitations. Products is going to be replaced with invitations. Product is going to be replaced with invitation. And then products is going to be replaced by invitations. And now let's just read through it to make sure we didn't mess anything up. So this constant, hopefully I named it right. Invitations, looking good. Okay. Now importing this, the initial state is just an empty dict. And for your invitations, this is your initial state. This is the name of it. And for the reducer set invitation, you're going to be passing an invitation. When you set multiple invitations, pass in a list of invitations. Set those by ID, and then to unset, you pretty much should pass in an ID, which is a number, and you delete it from state. And all of these look good. So in my store index, let's go ahead and piece these together. Okay, so exchange orders. All right. So I'm now adding a new slice to my state, and it's invitations, and the value is the invitation reducer. All right, that looks good. And now the last thing that we're going to need to do for now is just create a selector function from it to pull that data from our store. So invitations. Okay, so now I call the selector function get invitations, just give me all the invitations in my store, aka state. All right, looking good. Now on that note, what we can do is we can go ahead and create our API functions, and then later on our dispatcher functions. So first API functions. So refactoring name, get this word. All right. So I believe we can just steal these as well. Maybe addresses would be even better. Interesting. So we're going to be creating, this is better. Okay. And also for the create address request, I may want to type this out too. Okay. So here, under this API address, I had the fields whenever you're creating an address. Let's do this. So refactoring name. We're going to create another TypeScript file. And this is going to be called create invitation request. And what do you accept? Well, all you accept is a note string. And now we can use that. Types invitation, get all my types in order. And all right, so now we just got to import to you. All right, so we have a new create invitation request type. And you're going to go right there. And now, okay. So I'm going to use the same pattern for addresses. However, instead of addresses, it's going to be invitations. And now anytime that you see the word address, replace it with invitation. Let me do words only. Invitation. And just make sure all these are going to be good, 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 good. And then, actually, maybe this is fine too if I don't do words. So create invitation request, delete invitation, get addresses. That's going to have to be fixed up, but let's do this. Okay, this should, I believe, give us all the logic we need. Okay, so let's read through it and make sure it all worked out. So we are importing from this file an invitation object, or excuse me, invitation type, and create invitation request. Now the endpoint's invitation, whenever you call create invitation, you're going to be passing in this request data, which is just a note. And then you're going to be getting back a full invitation, which is what we want. Now to delete it, just give it a number. You're not going to be getting back in anything. Now when you get invitations, you're going to be getting back a list of invitations. That's what we want. And then when you update an invitation, you give us the ID of what you want to update. And then the same data, pretty much just a note. It's the only thing you can do whenever you're updating. And then you're going to get back the updated invitation. And this looks all good. Okay. So now that those are taken care of, let's actually make our dispatcher functions for us. So dispatchers, invitations, and we can probably just borrow all of these as well. Okay, so now instead of address, just replace it with invitation. And I'm also going to need to redo this. And addresses, invitations. And get invitations and set invitations spelled correctly. Okay, so this should give us our dispatcher functionality, but let's see, create, delete, get invitations, update invitations. We're gonna set one, set multiple, or delete by unsetting. Okay, whenever we create, we pass in create invitation request, and then we set an individual information with that data. To delete it, we're going to be passing in an ID, and then we're going to unset it from the store after it comes back from the backend that we deleted it. To get invitations, we aren't going to pass in any filters or any query params for now. And then we're going to set those in our store, and then to update, what we're going to be doing, just updating, passing in the ID, data, set invitation from the store. Okay. So now that we got everything structured, hopefully everything's working correctly, we can go back to our page, and then where was that, profile, index, and then from there we're doing things in the modal. So invitation modal is open. Okay. So eventually what we're going to do is we're going to be passing in a prop here, depending on if we're creating or editing one. But for right now, let's just work on the creation side of things. So shop, sell products. Okay. And now I'm wondering if, let's just get an easier form for now. Okay. So let's use the exchange. Where was that? The exchange. And then it was in the main area, trade. Actually, what we can do is this. So now I just want to work on the form logic, just figuring out where I can borrow it from. All right, so withdraw, we'll just use the same logic as this form. And I would just say, pretty much just find it already. Find it. And I'm going to be stealing a bunch of stuff from you. Okay. So first of all, let's just get our initial values. And we can do this as well. So in this modal, what we're going to do is we are going to have pretty much building a create invitation request, and we're going to have a note, which is just an empty string. Now we are eventually going to need to validate that with a validation schema. And for this, we need to use memo that comes from React, and then yup for validation. Does yup. And then what we can do is we can say, let's get another validation schema actually. Address string, okay. So I guess this is pretty much it, where we have a note field, and we'll just validate that it's a string for right now. However, I believe we're going to need to, let me check on the backend actually. Note, yeah, it has a max length of 255, but we can work on all that later. Okay, just want to get things working right now. Let's see, on that note, let's go ahead and see what we need to import for this. So formic, form, inputs, and button. So formic and form are going to come from formic. And then our input and button are going to come from components. So now let's get a form being displayed. So formic, steal you. And you're going to be displayed right here, and then handle submit. We'll just log basically the data out for now. So in handle submit, what we can do is actually just say, yeah, we'll just log out those values. We don't need you. And then if there is error, we'll say error creating invitation. Even though this may say error updating invitation, we will also replace that later. So we have a note that we are, here we go. So we have a note field, and it's named note, and the type is text, which is the default type for this. And for this button, we can say submit. And then on submit, it's going to call handle submit, which is just going to log out the values for now. So let's go ahead and just make sure nothing is broken so far. So I'm going to create this, and then once I add a note like that, it just logs this out. Okay, looking good. Now the next thing we need to do from here is actually send this data to the backend. So what we need to do is we need to import dispatch, and that's going to require app dispatch. So whoa, what's going on here? Oh yeah, display error toast. app dispatch. TU, okay. And then, all right. And then dispatch is going to use dispatch from React Redux. So let's get everything that we are going to need. All right, so dispatch, going to need U. And then also might as well get this standard. All right, so from dispatchers invitations, what we are going to need right now is create invitation. More later, but not right now. And then whenever we submit this form, we are going to call create invitation, and the data is just going to be the values. And then clean this up. All right. So now if this goes correctly, we should be able to create invitations on the back end. So now let me actually delete all of these so we can see more clearly if it worked. All right. So now just gonna refresh this, make sure we got a clean start. Note is, for Betty. This invitation is for Betty. So I'm gonna submit this. Okay. It looked like on the back end, it created it. We got our data back, and now we just need to close the modal. So after this, just close the modal and probably put up a success toast too. Let me think. Yeah. So after I create and edit a product, pretty much want to follow that same design pattern. So after you created a product, it says product created, and the toast type success, and that's coming from enums. Okay. So once you create an invitation, then we'll say invitation created, and then we'll close the modal as well. So now let's test out our new functionality. All right, so this one we can say for Bob. Submit that, invitation created, the modal closed, looking good. So now we should have also invitations in our store. Awesome, awesome, beautiful, beautiful. So what to do next? What I'm thinking is, even though eventually what we're going to want to do is update this invitation modal to support editing invitations right now, what we can do from here is actually just render out these invitations, and then we'll kind of build it intuitively, where once we have these invitations rendering out, then what we can do is we can add like a little section on the right. I don't know if it's going to be just these action links right here. I kind of like the idea of having a drop-down list instead. But either way, for each of these invitations, we are going to want to say edit or delete, depending on if they've been accepted or not. What I'm thinking a drop-down probably, since we have kind of limited space here. But either way, let's just go ahead and work on that right now. Okay. So whenever I render this, what I probably want to do, actually in this profile, do I have this invitation section that I didn't use yet? All right, so I'm done with the modal right now. This is my profile, this is my profile styles. Let me just see what I did with sell products. Okay. Yeah, I have render products and products rendering there. And this is pretty much the exact same design pattern that I want. Okay, so here, instead of products, I'm gonna have invitations. LMN. So invitations, and we'll keep it a grid. But how many columns? So we have a column for the user label, that's one. The notes is the second column. The third column is the code. The fourth one, we can render a status, and then the fifth one can be the actions. So we'll say, let's say, yeah, I don't know how this is. Wait, we have 5, right? So let's do 2, 2, 1, 1, 1. We can always change that later, but basically we have 5 columns in the first 2, which is the user label, and the notes can be a little bit bigger than the code, the status, and then the action buttons. Okay. So now let's just copy this pattern where we can say render invitations. And then what we can do is let's just get all of our one, two, three, four, five. Okay, so how do we want to do this? Let's just go ahead and get our invitations first. And we don't need you, and you are in the wrong place. All right, so just like we were selecting our products here, we need uSelector from React Redux. And then for selector state, we're going to do get invitations. And then pretty much just like we did here. Okay, so we are going to say we're going to get the invitations. We're going to store you in a variable called invitations. And then we're going to clean up our imports. Yeah, and maybe we do that invitation list. Yeah, I kind of like this method. Okay. Forgot where else we had it. Maybe addresses. Yeah, maybe it was by addresses. Yeah, address lists like this. So this is going to be invitation list. And right now we may need to do some filtering later, but it'll basically just give us a flattened list of all our invitations, since by default they're keyed by ID in the object. And now here we can say if you have any invitations in your list, then just go ahead and render those invitations. Otherwise, just say no invitation to display. And now what we can do is we can say ordered invitations are equal to your invitation list sorted by created date. And now for each of your ordered invitation, what you are going to do is you, Mr. Computer, are gonna pretty much create an invitation component from those, which we don't have yet, but we will soon. And then you're going to render them in the invitation section. So first, let me pretty this up. And all right, so next thing we got to do is just create an invitation component. And then we should be looking all right. And this is actually going to be pretty similar to this product component right here. So let's see what we got going on over there. Okay. Okay, so let's just do this off the bat. So we're going to make a new pretty dumb component, I would say. And it's just going to be an invitation component. and then you're going to have some styles, and then we need a main component file for you. And then instead of this, we're just going to say invitation, and you are not going to have any class name at all. Okay, so you are, wait, so we don't have any styles in it either. Oh, we can, okay. No container though. Yeah, I don't believe we need a container here either. All right, so clean up some unrelated code right here, but okay. So yeah, we don't need a main container in the styles file because we are using it. So we don't need to import you just yet. So anyways, you are going to have 5 columns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's just create those right now. So div. So this is going to be the user label. So this is going to be the leftmost column, and then we have the note, and then we have the code, and then we have the status. Maybe we'll remove this, but this will either say pending or accepted, and then last but not least, we'll have the actions that you can do. And now for each of these, what I want to do is we can just import that invitation object, and all right, HIJK, okay. So this is also going to take an invitation, and we aren't getting yelled at right now, but we will. So I want to import invitation as T invitation, since the component is also named invitation. And then what I can do is just say I am passing in the invitation through invitation props. So you are going to accept an invitation. And now what we can do is just kind of start rendering some of this. So invitation dot, that was the note, and invitation.code, and that'll be good for right now. Okay. So this invitation component takes an invitation. And all right, let's see what we got. Okay, looking good in the neighborhood for Betty, for Bob, and let me create one more for Carl. And they're all being sorted like we want. The user label will go here if there is a user, otherwise just null. And then here's the code, status, and the actions can be a drop down. So that's looking good for now. Okay, cool. Okay, so now let's just actually just start working left to right and yeah, piecing this together. So first, I think this might be good for this page. Make sure my imports are in the right order. I don't think we need to do too much to it, but we can always come back to it if so. Okay, so now let's tackle this. So first I want to go to components and look at my user label. Oh, this is interesting. So user label, it doesn't take a user object. Instead it takes, and I like this actually. Okay. Name, description, and avatar. So what I can do, I'm just trying to think what to display when the user is null. Otherwise, in other words, they didn't accept the invitation yet. So there are two options here. What we can display is a user label. By the way, this is the user label component right here. So we can display a user label with just the default profile picture and basically just dashes instead of here, or we don't have to display the user label at all. We can just put a hyphen instead. But what I'm thinking is maybe a user label with the default is a little bit better. So let's, and for the avatar, wait, what am I doing? This isn't even the front end. Okay. Yeah. And for the avatar that's being displayed on my user label, what's going on with that? But either way, let's just display a user label off the bat, and then we can kind of figure out if this is the best pattern. So const render user label. Okay. So we are going to display a user label, and this user label is going to take a description, and it's also going to take a name, and we'll just have 2 hyphens for now. Okay, so let's just see this. So something like this, and apparently for the user label, we are not passing in an avatar and pretty much just using my face. So I think I just hard coded something in that shouldn't be hard coded. So avatar, and then in my avatar, go. Okay. Ah, yes. So anytime I'm using an avatar here, I'm just pulling the self avatar instead of the user that I want to pass in. So I just need to update this. Okay, so I need to update some other places. Okay, so whenever we are using an avatar, instead of just pulling my own avatar or whoever the logged in user is, let's just go ahead and pass in a source. And this source, let's say that if it's an empty string, then we're just going to use the default. And that was the same logic that was in self avatar. So under my hooks, use self avatar. What we can do is say this. So we are going to be rendering a source if we pass it in. Now, if this is equal to a blank string or null, we'll say, then we can use the default avatar. Okay. And that should work. All right. So for avatar, actually, let's go ahead and see everywhere the avatar is used straight up. So this avatar component is just being used in the user label right now, which makes things a lot easier. Because then in the user label, if we see everywhere this is being used, then what we can do is we can just accept an avatar. And let me make sure my naming is kind of in sync. So yeah. And then I also may want to replace name with a username. So avatar is a string or null. Yeah, this is good. Okay. So when using the user label, we're going to be passing an avatar, which is a string or null. And then in my avatar component, actually this is called the source. Okay. So that's either equal to a string or null. For the name, I should probably just rename this to username, huh? To keep everything consistent. Yeah. So username, username, username. And then for this styled component, just gonna rename this to username. QRSTU. Yeah, I think this is a little bit better. A little bit tedious to go through and do it now, but it'll pay off in the end. Clarity is very important. Okay, so now our user label component is kind of updated, new and improved. Now we just gotta pretty much find all the instances of it that broke and update those. So user label, first of all, alright, so the description is nothing. For the username, we'll just put an empty dash right here. And then for the avatar, what we can do is we can just do null. Okay. Now where else are we using you? So here, actually let's just clean all these up. So and then for the avatar, this would be order.buyer.avatar. And then for the seller's avatar, we can do order.seller.avatar. We should be good for that. User label, user label. All right, on the buy checkout page too. So this is username. And then for the avatar, this is self avatar. And then for the seller avatar, it is cart seller.avatar. All right, making progress here. That is good. This is username, and for avatar, product.seller.avatar. All right, that looks good. Well, what am I doing here? Here we go. User label. And I think this is the last one. So this is a username. And then for avatar, it is product.seller.avatar. All right, so now all our user label components are updated. So here, let's just go ahead and, all right, everything recompiled. That's a good sign. And all right, now in my shop, yep. Okay. So sell, just making sure that nothing broke. Buy, user avatars. Okay, good to go. Now, so what I'm thinking is, yeah, so let me first just test the logic where when one of these invitations gets accepted, and I'll say this ZW1 was accepted by Carl. So invitations, ZW, recipient, I don't even have a Carl, but do I have a Bob? Okay, so let's see that this invitation for Bob, which is W1, was accepted by Bob. So W1 was accepted by Bob. Bob is set to the recipient. Gonna continue editing. And okay, so now we have, oh, we didn't even get the invitations yet, did we? Nope. Okay, So another thing that we have to do on, yeah, this is actually good. Helps me build it out. So now whenever we go to our profile page, we actually need to fetch those invitations. So let me find out. Let me just borrow another use effect fetch somewhere. And this one's perfect. Okay. So here, what we were doing is saying use effect, and we want to dispatch let me borrow this from the modals, invitation modal. Okay. So we want to dispatch the method to get invitations. And then dispatch, we are going to need you. Use selector, use dispatch. Okay. So now whenever we go to the profile page, we're going to get our invitations. So now when I refresh this, it should have, yep, got those invitations. And now in our Redux, we should see the updated data for Bob. Okay. So now we actually have Bob's invitation in here. And I also want to give a profile pic to Bob so we can test that out too. And I don't even think I can do it from here, but if I log in as Bob from my app, so log out, log in as Bob. I believe his password is bacon12345. Yep, lucky guess. Okay, so now Bob, since that's your password, you are now going to have a profile picture of Bacon. And now that I updated that, log out, log in as Bucky, profile. Okay, so now I have Bob, and he has a valid profile picture now. So now we should be able to render his information right here. So on that note, what I'm going to do is whenever rendering this user label, I'll say, maybe I can just do it right here. So I will say, first check if there's a recipient or not. So const invitation.recipient. All right. So the avatar, I'll say if there's a recipient, then render the recipient.avatar, otherwise render null. And I want to do the same thing with the username, but with a hyphen instead. So recipient.username, otherwise the default for this is just a hyphen. Now let me pretty this up and we'll see what we got going on here. Okay, so Bob accepted, so that is why we are seeing his username, and for this description, I probably just want to put the created date. Yeah. Okay, so for the description, this is interesting. So do I just always want to render, and what do I have for dates? Long date. Okay. So let me just see how the date looks. Although it may look a little bit funny, but alright, so for description, what we can do is we can just say the invitation is created date. And then render them all like that. And that looks pretty terrible. So, but I think I do want the date rendered right there. Kind of to see when you created the invitation. but I don't like that date format at all whatsoever. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop open one of my other projects and get another date util function. So short date, short date is today, get time ago. Okay, let's get all these. So my date util functions, I, J, K, A, B, C, D, F, G, H, I, J, K, L. So this is going to require get pluralized time. All right, some fancy date functions here. But now let me just see how it looks with the short date. And when you pass in the short date, you need include today at, I'll say true. Okay. See you. All right, that's a little bit better. So now we are able to see, I mean, it still doesn't look great though, because yeah, I don't like this hyphen. I'm thinking that maybe, I mean, is this better where we can say that if there is a recipient, pretty much something like this. If no recipient, then we just return an empty label like this. I mean, is this better? Or is the other one better with like an empty user? This one looks kind of weird. We could also just render nothing, but that's going to look super weird. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. What do I do? What do I do? Maybe. Well, I will say of those two options, I am leaning towards this one. However, maybe, boy, oh boy, oh boy. Maybe I just need more dashes there. That looks kind of weird too, but actually it doesn't look awful. Not great, but not awful. I think I just need a designer desperately. All right. So, I mean, it's working right now at least, and that has to count for something. Okay. So invitations, apparently if you don't have a user, this is the UI for it, which feels a little bit funny, but you know, not that terrible, I would say. This of course is the notes. This is the invitation code that you can send them. So now let's just go ahead and work on status. And for this, we're going to have two statuses, kind of similar to cell products, where it's going to have active in draft, but it's pretty much just going to look like these. But instead of active in draft, we'll say accepted or pending. So on that note, should we make these enums or not? Because they don't get stored in the backend that way. But it would be nice to have those standardized. But either way, let's go see how we did it with products. Close out of you for now. Okay, so store or not store. So pages, shop, sell products. We are rendering a product. And then for the activation status, yeah, we have a product activation badge. And all this is gonna do, oh wait, oh, that's interesting. It's not even a badge component. Interesting, interesting, very interesting. Well then, why do we have this badge component? Alright, we need to unify some stuff here. Yeah. Okay. So what I thought was happening was that we made a generic badge component for like these displays right here. And also I remember, yeah, in your exchange from your orders, there was a badge there too. But anyways, what I was thinking we were doing is that this badge component for the shop pretty much used that generic badge component that we have, but it looks like it's just creating its whole new thing. And I don't think we want to do that. Draft. Interesting, 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 interesting. Yeah. So let's see if we could unify this. And then we can pretty much take that same styling. Okay. Green. And then I think I want to add a draft state to this. So right now we have active, which is green for 100 on that. Success. Okay. So first, let's do this. Let's add another badge style called draft. Okay. And then for this badge style called draft, what we want to do is we can create a dark gray mix-in for it. And then we can say, if you ever render that, then just include that mix-in. Okay. Okay. So now, what we can do is this. When you render a badge, you pass in the badge style and text. Okay. So what we can do here is we can say import yeah, let's do this. Actually, where did we do that? Yeah, this is pretty much. Oh, this is nice. How are we doing this? Oh yeah. Okay, let's do this. Let's do exactly this. Okay. So for the product activation badge, what we're gonna do is we are just going to pass in the activation status. Now first, let me delete my styles file since we don't need any of this anymore. Don't need you anymore. And all right. So for the activation status, that's going to be the text of the badge, and also the badge style is going to be equal to active or draft. So active. Yeah, I like this design pattern. Okay. So what we can do is we can say, all right, so if it's active, we'll put you in success. If it's draft, then you get a draft badge. Okay, so now to render product activation badge, we just pass in the activation status and say, if you are active, you get success, draft, and then the text is the activation status, so that should work. Now let's see how it looks. Okay, so first of all, the green badge is a little bit too dark, but I just want to test this logic where our badge is still working for active and draft. Okay, perfect. So now let me just go ahead and update this. Should we update these all to 400? Probably. And let's just do it one by one. So 400 should give us that nice, slightly darker shade of green. Yeah, that's a much better green. Unless we want to go 500. That's a little bit too bold though. Okay. Also, this is now getting into kind of styling when we're really mostly just worried about, yeah, getting things working for now. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is pretty much just create this exact same thing. However, I don't have this activation status enum or the equivalent for invitations. And the reason for that is because it's not a value that's stored on the back end. We're basically going to be determining if the invitation is accepted or not based on if there's a recipient. However, even so, we can still create an enum for it because we're going to be using this as a standard on the front end. Okay, so invitations enum, I'm going to create an, how can we say this? Invitation status. I'll say accepted or pending. Whoa. So invitations is accepted if it has a recipient, otherwise it's pending. So now what we can do is just import these. I sound like a robot. All right, so from invitations, we're just gonna render invitation status. And then from there, yeah, let's keep you around. Yeah, let's FGHI, okay. So now, like you, Mr. Product Invitation Badge, what we are gonna do is we are gonna create an invitation status badge. I think that's a good name for it. Yeah. So enum index invitation status badge. Okay. So new directory invitation status badge, and it doesn't have any styles file. It's just going to have a new component, and pretty much the same design pattern as you. So now we can delete you and do some renaming. Refactor rename this component. And instead of activation status, this is invitation status. So replace all those. Also this. Okay. So invitation status could be, what did we say, accepted, and that can be success. And then when this one is pending, we'll render it in draft mode. So now we should be good for this. Let me just read through it real quick. So this is pretty much a specialized badge, which takes the invitation status of accepted or pending, and then we just render the badge based on that. and that is determined if we have a, okay, so activation status, and we'll just name this status. Yeah. We can really just put it in a div though, can't we? Yeah. Okay. So now let's go ahead and import that component. So invitation status badge. And I'll say so actually for this I could say render status badge. Or render invitation status badge. So just keep it very clear. Holy sweet tamale. Okay. Render invitation status badge. First thing we need to do is import our enums. Yeah, I don't need you anymore. So we can get everything standardized, and we can say we're going to create a variable for invitation status, and we can say this is equal to first checking if there is a recipient. So recipient, if so, then the invitation status is equal to invitation status dot accepted. Otherwise, it's equal to invitation status dot pending. And now what we want to do is we want to return our invitation status badge, where the invitation status is equal to the one that we just calculated. And now we can take this render function and render it in place of our temporary status text. And now, if everything went absolutely perfect, we should see this. Okay, beautiful. So Bob is the only one who accepted his invitation right now, so this is accepted. All the other ones say pending, which is great. Awesome. Now let me just create one more for testing. All right, that's still working, and all right. So now one of the last things we have to do is fill out these actions right here. And again, what we allow is for the editing of these notes right here. Also, we allow for any invitation that has not yet been accepted to be deleted. So what we are going to do is this. Let's, okay. Let's first do this. Let's pluck recipients from invitation, since we're using it kind of in a couple places. So I don't need that anymore and don't need this anymore. And we're also going to use it for the determining if we can delete it from the drop-down menu. So I figured we use it enough where it's warranted to pull that out. But now let's just go ahead and get that drop-down menu. And why are you not? Oh, probably because, okay. So now, yeah. So let's just import it, since we're definitely going to need that. And then we can just say render drop-down menu and menu options. Maybe just steal you for now. And actually, let's clean this up a bit. Got to keep things alphabetized, and then all right, handle edit, click, and want to import you, clean you up, keep everything nice and clean. Okay. Wow. So now let me just put empty click handlers just to make sure that actions, MO, just to kind of test things in stages so we aren't testing everything all at once. All right, so I have my drop down right here, and when I click edit, so you just click edit and then delete, click delete. And I believe here, what I want to do is pretty much style these so they float on the right. So I'll say, okay. So first, let me just get my styling taken care of. And say drop down container, run. Am I not importing that? All right, so for my drop down container, say display flex, and let me play around with this in Chrome. All right, this is my drop down. Wait, why am I? Oh, here we go. All right, so I want justify content. End. And this is my flex direction row by default. Yeah. All right, so justify content end, that's gonna push everything to the right. And I'm thinking that I may have too much space as well. So either way, I'm just gonna display the drop-down container. Do I want to rename it drop-down menu container? I think that's a little bit more explicit. Okay. The drop-down menu container houses the drop-down menu, and these should all be floating to the right now. And on that note, another thing that I want to do real quick is I pretty much want to say how do I update this so the last column should take up the minimal amount of space, and I'm not sure, so I'll try ChatGPT. What you gonna do? Okay, each fraction represents a fraction. Min content. Beautiful. That was easy. What you gonna do? Okay. Now, oh, that didn't work. Maybe because everything's a fraction still. Did my grade update? Yep. Min content. Oh wait. It's just because it actually did work. It's just that my statuses are now floating to the left. But we can actually fix those up as well, along with the code. And I believe that those are the only... Maybe the code should remain left aligned. I don't know. But either way, I want my status floating in the middle. I think that'll look better. So, invitation style is drop-down menu container. Get rid of you for now. We are also going to have invitation status badge container. These are getting a little bit cumbersome, these names, but I like things super explicit and standardized. And this is justify content center. So, yeah, it looks a little bit long, but Holy sweet ravioli. Okay. So for this, well, first of all, it is floating in the middle, which is good. However, display flex. Yeah, I think I just want. Maybe inline flex is what we want. Nope. Now what we could do is just put it in another div, but all right, so display flex, justify content center. And let me just try flex direction. Yeah. Pretty much just don't want it to grow that height. So I was saying that what I could do is just this. And that is not bad. I have an extra div, but yeah, I think that's good for now. If anyone knows how I can simplify this, pretty much to get rid of this extra div, then let me know. But otherwise, I'm just taking that badge and sticking it in a div and displaying it flex in center, and then my badge doesn't grow. But I'm sure there's an easier way for that. Okay, so what do we got to do next? So now let's go ahead and get these components working. Okay. So first, let's get the right options here, where we're saying that if the status equals accepted, in other words, if there's a recipient, then you don't display the delete function. Okay. What's going on here? Okay, ChatGPT, gonna put you to work. So if render, do not include the delete option. The delete option, the delete object in menu options. And might as well just toss you my entire component for context here. Boom, 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 boom. All right, so create a menu with just the edit button, and then if there is no recipient yet, then push in the delete logic, which is good. And now this should work already, because right here you get both. Right here you can only edit it because there already is a recipient. Okay. Now things get a little bit more tricky. What should we do now? Let's work on the edit logic, because the delete logic is going to be a little bit trickier. Okay, so to edit, so when we click edit, we're going to need to render that invitation modal. And that is being rendered already in profile. So first, let's just say that this may be a little bit easier than I thought. Maybe a little bit harder, who knows? Okay, either way, let's figure it out. So when we click edit, we're going to render this invitation modal. And that is coming from modals, invitation modal. And then we can just use the same logic of, first let's import what we need. Okay, but we're going to need to do something special in just a bit. This is interesting. I'm hoping very interesting. So I'm hoping that CSS Grid doesn't view this as a separate element, it needs to render, but I have a feeling. Okay, so on edit, what you do is you toggle the invitation modal, and that's going to be called, okay, this is good, this is good. Yeah, so I believe since we're rendering this in a portal, I just want to see what's actually going on behind the scenes. Since, yeah, grid is going to display all these. And let me just see where this is rendering. Okay, beautiful. So what I was worried about is this basically. Whenever we are rendering our invitations, you see that we are using CSS Grid, and we're saying we're going to give you basically 5 elements for each row, and those are these elements right here. A user label, a note, a code, the badge, and then the drop-down menu container. Now conditionally, just because of our component structure, we may be rendering another element, which is the modal right here. And I thought that since sometimes it has 6 elements, it may get confused with grid. However, the reason that's not causing any issues is because in our modal, I'll kind of just show you what's going on. So in our modal component, we are actually not rendering the component right here like it may look like. Instead, what we're doing is we're using a portal to render it basically outside our entire hierarchy in an element called modal root. And then, yeah, so that's giving us the logic that, pretty much the exact logic that we need, for now, at least. So, now, whenever we edit it, then we can edit this note, everything's working correctly. No logic for delete, but now let's keep chugging along with the edit logic. Okay. So, what we can do here is pretty much update our invitation modal. And we're going to be passing in an optional invitation. So update invitation from types. We'll say we're going to pass in optional invitation. And if you have an invitation, then we are going to be editing that invitation. Otherwise, we're going to be updating the invitation. And I'm going to have ChatGPT do this. However, what we can say is we can give it another standard from our address pages, which is in shop. Okay. Actually, would this just be easier just to do it without ChatGPT? It may be. It may be. Okay. So let's do it this way. Initial values note. So for the initial values, we're first checking if we have an invitation. If so, use the note, basically whatever value exists already on that. Otherwise, if you don't have an invitation, then just go ahead and use an empty string, and that's going to give us our initial values. Now another thing that we need to determine is if we are updating an existing invitation or creating a new one. For that, we're going to have logic similar to this. So if you have an invitation already, then let's just do the create logic first. All right, so if you have an invitation already, then what you're gonna do is update it. Otherwise, if you're creating a new one, then you're gonna do something like this. Okay. And then whenever you update your invitation, so if you have an invitation already, then you're just trying to update it. And to do that, you pass in the invitation ID with along the form values you submitted. And then after the invitation is updated, we just say invitation updated, give you a success toast, and then close the modal. Now if you're trying to create a new invitation, then we're just going to say invitation created, and then close the modal. And okay, so we have some just need to fix our error messages. Okay, so for the verb, if you get an error message, we're going to say if you have an invitation already, then you're trying to update it. So it's going to say error updating invitation. Now if you don't, then you're trying to create it, so it's going to say error creating invitation. And then for this header, we'll just say invitation right now. Should we have a verb there too? Maybe. Let me call this header verb. It's fine. And then you are going to be replaced by something that looks like you. And I will say verb invitation. Okay. So now let's test all of this out. And hopefully our edit logic should be working, unless I missed something. But either way, well, first, when you edit this, it should say, so that's incorrect. And that is because all this logic depends on us passing through the invitation to the invitation modal, and we didn't do that. So this is invitation, close, close, invitation equals invitation. And now, okay. So I'm going to edit this. It says update invitation for Bob, and I'll say for slob is the update. That gets updated, invitation updated, beautiful. And now let me just edit this for Smarl. All right, invitation updated, beautiful. Now when I create a new one, it should say create invitation and say for Joe. All right, beautiful. Edit, update invitation for Schmo. All right, I think we're good to go. And now another thing that we need to do in addition to this is we need to convey to the user, actually I see a couple of different things. So first, before we get to that, let's just fix this grid situation. So on this template, I have a left and a right section. Left is the basically user details, and the right is the I don't know, page content, I guess you could call it. Now let me just add a gap of maybe 32 pixels, maybe 48 even. Okay, that looks better. So now let me just fix the styling issue, and then we'll get to something else. So I can just close all that for now. Okay. So the profile, we in the main container have this, and I want to add a gap of 48 pixels. All right, so that looks pretty good. Actually, what is my gap on the right? 32. Let's bring it down to 32. See if that looks any better. I kind of like the looks of that, actually. Okay. So now the last thing that we need to do is we need to convey to the user how many invitations they have, because remember, for our invitation logic, each user gets an invitation limit, and then whenever they invite a user, that new user gets one less than their limit. So I have an invitation limit of 10. Whoever I invite is going to have 9 invitations to send. Then the next person is going to have 8 invitations, and then so on and so forth. And I also want to add some logic, not only the UI of how many you created already and how many you have total, but also once they reach the max, we can just hide this button. So then they couldn't even, like, there's no use. Otherwise, it's just going to cause an error on the back end. So let's do that. Okay. Okay, so what, actually, let me kind of just give us a checkpoint here. So make lint. On the back end, I'm just going to lint everything, run tests, and then push this up. Okay. So push this up, and what did we change? We could say added created and modified date to response. Added created and modified date to response. Push that up. And now on the front end, I'm just do npm run lint. And then I'll do a little mini self-code review, and then we'll get started on the last feature of the invitation. I'm actually going to go ahead and grab another coffee. Maybe freshen up a bit. The coffee's actually pretty good. Okay. Now let's do a quick little mini itty bitty code review. Okay. So for the invitations, API methods looking good. And also nothing broke. Oh, another thing that we need to do is that delete functionality. Yeah, let's do that first, and then we'll call this okay, so for the invitation, first of all, let's minimize you. Okay, so yeah, the edit logic was working. We tested that. However, the delete logic was not. And I believe I'm going to need to reorder these. But when you click delete, we're going to call handle delete, and yeah, it needs to be up there. Okay, now to handle delete, what are we going to do? We are pretty much going to call, and it's going to look kind of similar to the modal actually, but instead of creating, we're just going to delete. So we are going to, yeah, we can just steal this. Okay, get rid of you. So I need my delete dispatcher, which is delete invitation. And now yeah, let's just get these toast. Okay. So when you call delete, it's going to be an async function, since it's going to make a request to the backend, and all we are going to do is log out something like, oh, I forgot my dispatch. All right, dispatch, come in with use dispatch. Okay. App dispatch, just make sure I got everything right. Okay. So what we are going to do when we click delete is we're going to fire a request to the backend to delete the invitation. Now when you delete the invitation, you need to give it the ID of the invitation, and that is coming from the invitation.id. Now after it was successfully deleted and the Redux has been updated, its store, we can display a toast that says invitation deleted, and we don't need to close anything because we're not in a modal. Now if there are any errors, then what we can do is just say error deleting the invitation, and we can just render it like this. Okay, that should be good. Code, optimize imports, and now let's see what we got going on. Okay, so this one we shouldn't be able to delete, that's good. Now let's see Smarl. I'm not friends with him anymore, so I just want to delete that. Invitation deleted. And on the back end, let me just verify this. All right, so I have 4 invitations right now, which is good. Let me delete this one, my testing one. Looks good, delete it from Redux. And I only have 3 on the back end. All right, looking good. So now what I want to do is lint this one more time, and then we'll push it up. And then we'll work on the last invitation feature, and then deploy, and then invite people, and then pretty much create the greatest social network ever. Easy peasy, just a couple more steps. Okay, so invitations, TUV, create an invitation, delete invitation, now being used, as well as get and update. Sweet, put everything to use. Very productive session here. Now my avatar made those changes so it wasn't just self avatar, but you can pass in a custom source, and we made use of that as well. A new badge style, we unified our product badge and also made the invitation status badge. So now we have a more consistent UI as well. So good changes there. There's our invitation status badge. Everything looks good. These are some user label updates. Our product activation badge is now also standardized, so that's looking good. Deleted that. Updated this user label. Renamed name to username to better reflect the source code. Renamed that. Reordered it. Keep things organized. Dispatcher functions. Invitation status enum. Now these imports look right. For the invitation modal, takes optional invitation if you're editing. Yep. Okay. And then for the invitation, which is basically the row, then we are catching any delete errors. Messages look right. This one, I'm wondering if we could wrap it in a memo, but that's a story for another day. Everything else is looking good. Some little kind of styling issue here. It's not really a styling issue, but just wondering if there's a more efficient way to do that. And let's see. And now here's my updated profile page, which kind of ties everything together. All right, so we got another modal. On load, we are fetching our invitations, which is good. Just memoizing a list. And all of that looks right. If we don't have any invitations, it'll just give us an empty state. And then our button to create an invitation, they're being ordered correctly. All of that looks nice. We added a gap for styling. This is component updates. And let's see what we got here. This is the updated user label. Okay, looking good. Selector, nothing fancy. Nothing fancy here. Invitation reducer. Reviewed this already. This looks all good. Okay, nice and ordered. Invitation and create and modified. It has an ID. Code null owner recipient. Recipient is user read or null. And of course, our fancy schmancy short date function. All right, looking good. So I will say invitation, creating, editing, and deleting. All right. This fly. I don't know if you remember from the last video where I had some flies flying around, but I got some fly paper and I caught 3 of them so far. I'll keep you guys updated on the fly update as well. But yeah, actually, let me stop the video here, and then I'm gonna go grab a coffee, and then we'll come back and we'll wrap up the rest of this invitation logic. And then I actually thought this was gonna take a couple days, but it's going all right. And then yeah, we can get started on the next feature. All right, so coffee gotten, and now what we got to do next is work on kind of the last part of our invitation UI component. And that is just to render out, probably right here, how many invitations they are allowed to send. So what I'm going to actually do is update my section heading component to include an optional subheading, and then what we can do from there is kind of just make it work. So for this, so we have a heading that's always going to be required, then I'll also say subheading. And then this can be optional. And then for the contents, I'm thinking that we have a left and a right. Yeah, that might be better now. So the container, am I doing anything with this? Okay. So I'm just going to make 2 left and right divs. We can just have them divs, but I like to have things named. Left, right. And then I can do something like this. So the heading is going to go on the left, and on the right, what we can do, yeah, that should work fine. Okay, so no change there. And let me just check some of my other sections. Wallets, cores, this goes on the right, shop, sell, left, right. Okay, so I want to make sure I didn't break anything else. So now what we can do is render that subheading. We can render it pretty much on a div or a span, so probably a span. Subheading, yeah, just like that. Okay, so the font size, let me just say it's going to be like 13 or something. So font size 13, and then if you do have a subheading, we can say If you have a subheading, then just render it, otherwise null. And for this, I'll say subheading is going to say something like 4 out of 10. Okay, so first of all, this section right here needs to be a flex. Display flex, okay. So display flex, align items, baseline, I want. And then for the subheading, I can just have padding left. So for the section heading, the left section, for the subsection, actually that would be margin left of, I don't know, try 16 pixels for now. And then for the color, actually I want, yeah. And for the color of this subsection, let's keep it light gray. Let's see how we're looking now. Not bad, but what I'm thinking is this is a little bit too far away. So maybe margin left of 12, or maybe even 8. And maybe the font is too big too. All right, let's just do this. Font size of 13, margin left of 10. And then that will be good. Margin left of 10. And all right. Yeah, this is looking all right. Okay. So now what we have to do is first, we can probably split this out into a separate render function, since we're going to be having to calculate 1. This is going to be the length of the list, and then 2, this is going to be the max amount. So because we're going to have some logic and we don't want to messy anything up, let's just say const render section heading. For now, we can just return what we got. And then this is going to be right above content. We're going to render the section heading. And now, as long as nothing broke, then we're good to go. Make sure I don't get any errors in my console. And then, all right, good to go. So now, the first thing we can do is say const numerator, and this equals to the invitation list dot length. In here, it would be the numerator over 10, which that's going to change in a bit, but something like this. Okay. So 3 means how many invitations you already created, and hopefully once I delete this, okay, it says 2, create another one, 3. Actually, what happens if you create one with a, interesting, so a note is required. Okay, may need to change that later, but for Lisa. All right, so now all we need to do, even though it's going to take a little bit of code, is we need to figure out the user's invitation limit. And how we do that is I made an endpoint on the backend, API invitation limits, and then you pass in the user ID, and then it's going to return the owner, which is pretty much just the ID you passed in, and then the amount right here. And then we can store that in Redux. And then we don't need to do anything fancy like storing under the ID, because Yeah, we'll just keep it simple for now. Since I'm thinking later on, you probably want to, so anyways, taking a step back, right now you can only view your own profile. Like even when there's another user right here, like nothing happens whenever you click their profile or anything. Now, later on, we will need to decide if you want to be able to view other people's invitations as well, or is this just private to you? And honestly, I'm not sure. I don't even know what the logic is that we're gonna want. Probably a discussion for all of us, but yeah, for right now, I'll just take this and I'll plop it in our store. Okay, so this is called invitation limits. So let's get started with that. Let's close out of all this, and we're gonna make a new type, and it's gonna be called invitation limits. Okay, now the interface for this invitation limit probably didn't even need to copy any of that, but it's just going to be an owner, which is going to be a number, and an amount, which is also going to be a number. Okay. And now what we can do is this. To invitation limits comes before invitations. So and let me just sort these to make sure everything stays nice and clean. Sort lines, and okay. So we have that, and now let's just go ahead and start prepping our slice. So invitation limits is going to be invitation limits. And the logic for this is going to be a little bit different. Maybe closer to self than anything else. Yeah. Okay. So first, let me go ahead and make a file where you can store this. So it's going to be the same as this. Make a new file to contain this data. And then copy self. Okay. So first, self would be replaced by invitation limits. Now this type is going to be replaced by invitation limit. And now this is going to be an empty state. And this is going to be equal to, you know what I can do is I can set it equal to this. So it's equal to an invitation limit or null. And then the payload action could technically be an invitation limit or null, although we're always going to be setting an invitation limit. And now let me just rename this. And this will be, what is the name for this actually? Limit or limits? And why are you freaking out? Tough decision. Invitation limits. Actually, you should probably name it. Okay, so now why are you freaking out? So null is not assignable to the type invitation limit. So I actually should type this out like this. This is actually interesting. I'm wondering if, rethinking everything right now, since I'm pretty sure we're going to have this functionality. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Like, why are we getting fancy with it here? You know? Like in the get serializer, invitation limit serializer, why not just pass down the ID and just do everything like super standardized? Why not? So then what I could do is this. Okay, we now have an ID. And why when I retrieve, I want many. So I just want the first, not many equals true. And what's this going to give me? Just one object. And if I do one I don't have access to, it doesn't matter. So I can retrieve. Oh, this is interesting. So let me do this. Owner equals 1, 2, 3. Empty list. Okay. So here we are saying that the user can only pass in basically nothing. However, I want them to be able to retrieve it for any users, even though in this current UI they're only going to be requesting themselves. All right. So in the query set, I'll say accept the PK from the URL rather than okay. Yeah, let's not do anything fancy here. Let's just stick with our standards. So rather than the request user, because this fanciness is really bleeding into our front end and can't follow our standards, yada yada. Okay. So this should be filter quargs from the PK, quargs from PK, request user. And let me just print this out actually. So now should be printing out 14, and let me just try to break this. So 1, this should return something valid, which is good. What if I do something like this? Value error 500. Okay. So I'll say, so this is just some QA. So how can I prevent the user trying to pass in a string for an ID, even though it's not the end of the world? I don't want to have any 500 errors come in. Ooh, I like this actually. Why not just do get object or 404? Yeah, this is much easier. And where's that coming from? We could say URL configuration. You can use regular expression in your URL pattern or your BK as a number. Okay, interesting. So I'll do that. First of all, what's going on here? All right, so for invitation URLs, URL configuration. Update my URL configurations. Router, while ensuring the PK is a number, you could override with get lookup regular expression. You know, regular expression was something that I was, well, what's going on here? 1 second. This method, interesting. This is fascinating. I never even knew this existed. Get lookup regex. First, this can be static. I don't use self. But anyways, for my server updates. Okay, I still get a 500 error. So we're at it doesn't make sense. This method doesn't do that. Okay. Route numeric PK values. There's something else might be wrong. Okay, let me just give you my whole stack trace then. So it seems that even ChatGPT is a little confused on this. I mean, we could just do that is digit. Yeah. Okay, let's do this then. Hopefully this works because I really like this pattern of saying the query set is equal to this. Get object or 404. And now when I pass in an incorrect, still 500. Remember, hand of the value can be raised, try to convert a non-string to an integer. Actually, this is probably better. More detailed error message. Okay. Okay. Take 15. Now, what do we need to do? We need to import HTTP 404 and okay. So we've got a couple of things going on here that we need to test. First, we need to test it with an invalid primary key and make sure we don't have a 500 error, which that's great, not found, although it should have. Not even worked with that. It should say invalid ID provided, but why not? So print owner ID. What logs out here? Interesting. Why is it not logging out? So just nothing then, huh? This is fascinating. Fascinating, fascinating, fascinating. Okay, so wait, what? Is it catching? What is happening here? Alright, so apparently it's catching an error, just the wrong one. So let's do this. And this is value error. Okay. So that's what we wanted to happen. But then why are you giving me the wrong error message? Maybe we need to throw a different kind of error? Because this is correctly... Alright, so whenever we convert a string, or attempt to convert a string to an integer, this is correctly throwing a value error, but it's just getting a little weird because I expect this error message to come back. Raise exception. I want to see somewhere in my views where I'm raising it. Okay. Return. Okay, so we can just do this instead. So instead of raising an error, we can just return an error like this. And that should work. And if so, we also want to replace it down here. So from REST framework, import status view sets. Okay, so now let's see. Okay, finally, invalid ID provided, and that means instead of raising an error whenever we have an issue, then what we could do is we can just do this. Pretty much do it manually. Okay. And now let's make lint, make sure there's an issue right there. And I don't think it's going to fix them for me. Nope. Okay, so code, optimize imports. And now instead of these double quotes, use single quotes. Instead of double quotes, single quotes. Now let's lint again. Okay. So now we got the logic that we want with all the edge cases taken care of. Close tabs to the left. And in addition to that, we're also returning the ID, which is what we want. Let's just sort these. So mount ID owner, keep everything nice and alphabetical. And then just one more time. Okay. So invalid ID gives us this. If there is a valid ID, but it doesn't exist, none found in this. And then once we do have a valid one, it gives us back that valid one, which is great. Now to our front end, let's go ahead and standardize everything. Okay. So in our typings, what we can do is pretty much follow the same pattern. And we can say that, okay, so we are going to be storing these invitation limits in a dict, and it's going to be called invitation limits, and it's going to have an invitation limit, which consists of an amount, an ID, and an owner. And then in our index, yeah, I like this already. Everything is nice and standardized now. So in our invitation limits, we're just going to say invitation limits, and then invitation limits. Okay. So now this is equal to invitation limits, which is going to be equal to an empty string. And now when we set an invitation limit, let me see what we did. We can just steal it from invitations. So with invitations under my store, we can say something like this. Invitation limits, okay. So when setting an invitation limit, the state is invitation limits. We're going to be passing in an invitation limit, and that pretty much takes care of that. So code, optimize import. Now let me just read through this, because we don't need to set multiple, and we don't need to delete any ever. So okay, all right. So invitation limits comes from invitation limits, spelled correctly. Now we're going to be importing invitation limits. The initial state is just no invitation limit. Set invitation limits, or excuse me, just set one at a time. That's all we need to do. And then we are going to be good to go. Invitation limits. Okay. Cool. Now let's just start piecing everything together. And so invitation limits comes before invitation. All right. So I now have a new invitation limit slice, and it's gonna be equal to the invitation limits reducer. And now in my selector, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say, whenever I ask for those invitation limits using get invitation limits, then just go ahead and give me whatever is in the store. Beautiful. So now what we need to do is write an API function and a dispatcher function to actually get those from the backend, populate the store, and then we'll read them out on our component. So API function, this is, okay. What I'm gonna do is probably get it from product, yeah, okay. So first let me make a new file called invitation limits, and then steal some stuff that I can replace later. So the only thing that we're going to need, well, a couple things. So first, this is called invitation limits, and in here, what we want to do is say anywhere we have product, just replace it with invitation limit. And let's see how far we got here. Authorization headers, okay. So we are importing invitation limit, and then this is the header that we want to use. Nothing fancy. This is our endpoint or base URL, and then when we ask for an invitation limit, we're going to be passing in the ID of a user, and then we're going to be expecting back an invitation limit, and the full URL is this base URL / the ID of the user that we want to get. It returns an invitation limit, and now that looks good. We just have to make a dispatcher function for it. So same name, so refactory name, get that, dispatcher function, new TypeScript file, and then we can use the same standard we were using for products and get an individual one right here. Okay, so invitation limit, we can say get invitation limit as get invitation limit. Okay, and from invitation limits, we are just setting an invitation limit. And this is get invitation limit. And we call this, then set the invitation limit. Okay, so now in our dispatcher function, what we're going to do is we're going to import get invitation limit from our API functions. Going to import the dispatcher function. Then we say whenever we call dispatch get invitation limit, we pass in an ID. You're going to get it from the backend, set it on the front end, and then we'll take it out later on. And that is what we need. Okay. So now on our profile page, whenever we go to this page, whenever we get our invitations, we also want to get our invitation limits. So invitations, dispatchers, and I want to say get invitation limit, and we can just do this. Get invitation limits, and we're going to need to pass in our self ID. So in order to do that, we can just select self out of our state, and we can do self ID. And this is going to have a little issue because self ID may be null. And that is because in our store, if you aren't logged in, then self ID is equal to null. But in order to fix this, we can just say no self ID and return. Okay, and why am I still getting this? Because I check right here. Is it because this? Okay. And also, these can be optimized using promise all. So let's do that right now. Okay. And dispatch to this. As well as this. Get rid of you. And all right. So when we go to the page, we are going to get our invitation limit for basically the logged in user. And then we're also going to get their invitations. And this should be working, and Redux should be populating already. So now, let me just go ahead and refresh this page and keep an eye on my network first. Go to this page, and it gets back the invitations limit for user 1, which is me. And all that's coming back correctly. Now let's look in our store. See invitations limit. Okay. Okay, cool. So what we want to do here is on this UI, we want to find the invitations limit for this user. And I'm wondering if it's a better idea to put this in a hook. But either way, we can probably abstract it out later on. So for now, actually, where am I calculating this? Right here. Yeah, let's just use a memo function. Invitation limit amount. So I will say that this first memo is going to be returning the information limit amount. And then what we need to do is this. So object values, first of all, we need to select all of our invitation limits so we can actually find which one belongs to this user. Even though there's only one in there, we can kind of build this assuming that there's going to be more in the future. So from our selectors, we want to get a list of our invitation limits. So selector state, get invitation. We'll optimize those imports later on. But here, yeah. All right, so our invitation limits. All right. So first thing we need to do to get the amount is we are going to get a list of all our invitation limits, and we're going to find from there, what we are going to do is we are going to pretty much iterate through each invitation limit, and what we're going to do is we are going to see the owner and find which one matches self ID, which is pretty much our ID. Yeah. Okay. So to get the invitation limit amount, look through all the invitation limits you have in Redux, and for each one, find the one where the owner matches the self ID. In other words, the profile you're looking at. Now, yeah, what I want to do is this. And then for this, I can just use an underscore. And then do something like this. Okay. So this is going to say if you can find one, then just go ahead and return the amount for that. Otherwise, just return 0. So it may be a 0 for like a split second while the request is pending, but otherwise we should be good. And then this can be used right here. Okay. And that should actually give us our logic. And let me just refresh this to, all right. So now mine is 8. Okay, cool. So invitations 3 out of 8. Now let me go ahead and revert that back to 10. Okay. So when I go to my page, it gets my updated invitations. Now let me just try logging out, logging back in, just to make sure nothing broke. Okay. So it was 0 for a split second, but then it's good. So now for this create functionality, let me minimize this down to 5. And then what I can do is I can say, basically, if you have 5 out of 5, then don't render this create button. Okay. So where are we rendering the create invitations button? Right here. So for the render create invitation button, this is write content. And what we can do, so we're comparing the numerator, which is the list of the invitations length, to this. Do we need this as well? I don't think so. I think it's just a little bit too much. Okay. So when determining whether or not to render the button that is going to allow the user to create more invitations, the logic we can say is if the invitation length, basically if the number of invitations you already created is greater or equal to, we should really only need equal to, but I don't know, we may get into a situation where like you created 12 out of 10. Maybe you created like way too many invitations and then, I don't know, Django admin came in like manually entered or something. Either way, it's just a little bit more safe this way. So if you created invitations that match or exceed your limit, then we just want to return null. Okay. So now, hopefully, I'm going to create 2 more. And after I create this one, then hopefully that button should disappear, which is good. Now I can delete one of these and it should reappear. All right, cool. And on that note, I actually think that takes care of this entire invitation feature. Sorted by created day, status. I mean, it doesn't look beautiful, I would say, but you know, it's functional. All right. Actually, that feature took a lot not as long as I thought. And I'm also noticing right here on the profile, we probably want to display the username, probably right here, but that's another thing. Okay, so now let me just, pretty much just review and clean everything up. Okay, so here, let's just make a lint. And then make test, which these tests are kind of unrelated, but also I'm really slacking on my writing tests, but I want to get these features out. Okay. So for the invitation limit serializer, we're now returning ID to keep everything standardized. Also to give us a little bit more flexibility on the front end. And then when we are retrieving this, we're doing some more clear things with the PK, where if they pass in a non-integer PK, then we're just going to give them a clear error message, invalid ID provided. And also if they pass in an ID of a user that doesn't exist, we'll just say no invitation limit found with this ID. All right, there we go. And then let's see what else we got going on. So that was actually it for the backend. So updated detail response. Push that up. And now for another mini review, so npm run lint. All right, no issues found. That's good. Now let's do one more review for this backend. Okay. So we wrote a API endpoint to get the invitation limit for an individual user, and this is looking good. And then we updated the section heading to include an optional subheading and restyled some things. That looks good. This is just our updated styling. The subheading is secondary color, pretty much light gray. Looking good. This is our dispatcher function. Everything is sorted. Basically call this endpoint and then set it in Redux. And those are all good. Importing our new dispatcher functions, our selector, and then we are fetching this data on page load, and then we are pretty much finding the limit by pretty much just finding it based on the user ID, and we'll just have 0 by default before the request comes back. Then we're saying if you already created more enough invitations to meet or exceed your limit, then we're just going to return null, so you can't create anymore. And then render the section heading right there with the proper values in it. And this is just our selector to pull that data from state. Constant for naming. Invitation limit reducer. All conventions look good. And then in here, pretty much nothing too fancy. Okay, all good. Our standardized invitation limit. We decided to store those as a dict, even though we only have a 1 now. We may be displaying this information for other users. Again, still don't know if we're even going to allow, well, I mean, we almost have to be able to see other people's profiles. We're definitely going to be allowing that. But the question is, should you see other people's invitations? And I don't know. I don't see a reason why you wouldn't, but maybe people want to keep that private. Who knows? But either way, I'll say invitation limit logic. And one last time, let me just log out, log back in, go to my profile, 4 out of 5 invitations. Say nice, invitation created, delete this one, edit this one for me. And even though this is accepted, I can still edit the note for you. Okay, I think all of our logic is working. So on that note, can pretty much merge these in. So backend, let me just merge these in. So first, what I like to do is whenever I'm creating a PR, I like to name it in a specific convention with the number of the issue, and then a little hyphen, and then the name of the issue ticket, and I can just say closes 48. And with this keyword, closes, whenever you merge your PR in, it'll automatically close this issue. And now all of these changes look good. Yeah, yep. Oh yeah, this for all my invitation updates. Okay, this looks good. Cool. All right, so I will squash and merge this in. By the way, I like to, another thing, I like to squash it before I merge it, because then you see in my master branch, I only have 1 commit. So if I ever need to revert this, it just makes it a little bit easier just to kind of explain what's going on here. And also another thing I like to do is stop my server before I pull down the branch. So master is updated now. I just merged everything into there. So I already deleted the branch on the back end. Now I can just delete it on my front end. Pull it down one more time, make sure I got the latest updates, and then just run that again. And let me make sure I do have it deleted on my local. and then no more branch on the back end. Okay. And now for the front end, let's just do the same, then deploy this bad boy. Clean some of this up. Okay. So front end like to follow the same pattern. The issue on the front end was 79. So let's say that 79, this PR is for invitation updates. And this closes issue number 79. Create a pull request. And then we were reviewing all of this is kind of as we went along. Let me just skim through real quick. Make sure I don't got any to-dos or anything. Looks good, that looks good, that looks good. Update those, update those. Actually, just make sure that, oh, wait a minute. You have some changes that we didn't push up yet. That could have been bad. Wait, no, we don't. What am I doing here? I thought I saw something blue somewhere. All right, nothing to roll back. Maybe I was just seeing things. Okay. Yeah, nothing to push up on the front end, so we're good on that note. And now, all right. Yeah, a nice little session today. All right, refresh this and then squash and merge, which is going to close the issue, so we should only have 4 issues left. So delete this branch. Sweet, 4 issues left. And now let me just go ahead and stop my server. And sometimes if I'm fetching master while I have my dev server running, I get some issues. But either way, backend branch deleted, front end branch deleted. Let's go ahead and restart this, confirm that our backend is still working locally. And the last thing I always like to do after merging in a new feature is just do some really light QA. So log out, log back in. All right, the feature looks good. This is all from master branch. Let me delete this, create a new one, and we're good to go. All right, so yeah, in just a few hours, we now have our invitation logic all built out. And let's see what other, oh yeah. So in the next video, what I'll do is this. I know Hasu, I told you a while ago, I was gonna make this update. My bad, it's been on the back burner for a while, but just wanted to get this core functionality out first. But either way, in the next video, this is what we will be working on. And then from there, another thing that I really wanna do is I'm gonna be adding some social functionality to this social network that we have. In my cooking core, or my cooking website I was working on, we had it where I actually really like this idea, but users could like share pictures of, basically share recipes, including a photo of whatever food, and then the details of the recipe, of course, like, I don't know, just the recipe itself. And it was, yeah, kind of just a way to, you know, see what everyone was eating, cooking from all around the world. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that same logic and I'm going to make a little bit more generic. So instead of having it be a recipe, it can just be a generic like social media post with an image and some text. And then I'll be building out a feed. So basically users can post pictures or just write any post like they would on, you know, another social media site. But then we start getting this thing, you know, a little bit more social. You'll actually have some way to do something with other users, interact with them in some way other than just inviting them, and of course trading with them. But yeah, gonna start making this thing come to life. Little by little, we'll get there. But yeah, for now, good coding session. Thanks for watching. And yeah, if you have any other suggestions of features you would want on the site, let me know. I'm building. And yeah, don't plan on stopping. So let's do it, baby. See you next time.